I feel like this video is going to be a hard sell, but I promise I have a point here.
The launch of Rainbow High was likely one of the only good things that came out of the hellish year of 2020. MGA Entertainment's latest doll line became a runaway success, with its chic and ornately detailed outfits, colourful aesthetic, and, well, sheer willingness to be a fashion doll line. If you look at the toy market, particularly the doll market, it had been defined over the past few years by surprise toys, unboxing gimmicks, and miniature collectibles. The 2010 fashion doll boom that spawned from Monster High and the Bratz anniversary comeback had long subsided. Monster High had a reboot, and flopped. Bratz had a reboot, and flopped. The real cash cows of the mid to late 2010s were lines like Shopkins and Hatchimals, and in 2016, MGA found their own colossal cash cow with LOL Surprise, a cash cow so profitable that you could slap an LOL sticker on a jar of cow and it would sell like hotcakes. And in 2019, we got one of the most promising doll lines in recent history, the LOL Surprise spin-off line, OMG, or Outrageous Millennial Girls. On one hand, these dolls were detailed, stylish, high quality, creative, diverse, and popular. Very, very popular. Some of the most popular fashion dolls arguably since Monster High. But on the other hand, again, you could slap an LOL sticker on anything and it would be at least a modest success. Oh yeah, and you still have to go through this surprise unboxing process. Regardless, the OMG fashion dolls were enough of a success for MGA to try out a fashion doll line that didn't rely on a surprise gimmick, with the same quality that people valued from OMG. And it worked. The launch of Rainbow High proved that yes, a line of fashion dolls can exist as a line of fashion dolls without being tied to an existing phenomenon. Or Barbie. Let's face it, Barbie's gonna Barbie.
You can't get rid of me, bitch!
And before you say that Rainbow High is tied to an existing IP, yes, we will get to that.
Rainbow High launched with 6 dolls and a CGI animated web series in mid-2020, and it slayed. It became a fashion doll juggernaut in its launch year, getting on a bunch of hot toy lists and becoming the number 3 best-selling fashion doll in the US, all without relying on an existing property to prop it up. And that's amazing. It's proven that fashion dolls can be relevant and popular in today's market, just as Bratz was in the early 2000s, or Monster High was in the early 2010s.
So what's the issue? Why am I making this video about the problem with Rainbow High? Truth be told, I've had this underlying feeling about Rainbow High for a while now. As much as I've been loving the designs and the series and the dolls, God, I spent a lot of money on these dolls. If that's not an endorsement of this series, please let me know in the comments below what is. Even through all of that, I felt like something was missing. So come with me and let's find out what's holding back Rainbow High from true fashion doll greatness. Hi everyone, I'm Ari Lynette and welcome to the Oliverse. Just before I get into this, I want to stress that this video is not intended to discredit or diminish anyone's work. There are a lot of people behind Rainbow High who have worked hard to make this series a success, and I don't want anything I say in this video to come across as an attack or a diss. This isn't a video about Rainbow High being bad. This is a video about Rainbow High having issues, and those issues don't take away from some of the awesome things that are in the doll series and the web series. So, to any of the designers, any of the animators, artists, voice casts, crew, or anyone involved in Rainbow High who didn't dox a minor on Instagram, please don't take this video as an attack. This is simply a discussion of an issue and something I felt needed to be talked about. So without further ado... yeah! So, if we're gonna start talking about Rainbow High, we need to discuss...
Poopsie slime surprise! My poops, my poops, my poops! What you gonna do with all that poop? All that poop? Yeah, woo, woo.
Rainbow High is a spin-off of the Rainbow Surprise dolls, which were themselves a spin-off of the Poopsie Slime Surprise toy line, and Poopsie Slime Surprise was spawned out of the trends of unicorns and slime.
Trend inspiration in the toy industry is nothing new. A lot of toy lines get their raison d'etre from greater trends.
Whether it's Bratz being inspired by the style and attitude of hip teenagers in Springfield, Missouri, or Monster High being inspired by the popularity of goth fashions and the Tim Burton aesthetic, or My Scene being inspired by your biggest competitor taking 40% of the doll market.
Trends inspire toy lines, and it's no secret that Poopsie Slime Surprise, while polarizing to many people, was in part made to capitalize on these greater trends. It also gives brands like Poopsie personality and identity, for better or worse.
When you see a line like Barbie, Bratz, Monster High, LOL Surprise, or even Poopsie Slime Surprise, there's a distinct personality and identity, which is incredibly important in any market. Poopsie Slime Surprise is defined by unicorns, rainbows, and ambiguously poop-esque slime, but it also employs brand parodies such as Fart Jacobs, and Pooey Piton.
And over time, MGA must have gotten the idea that the poop stuff wasn't really rubbing off as well onto the audience as they thought it was.
So when MGA created the Rainbow Surprise spin-off line of 14-inch dolls, also in a surprise package format, they lessened the poop a little. Sure, the characters still have slime elements and still carry cans of Coca-Cola and Fanta, but they're more palatable. And clearly this worked, because MGA did this part spin-off, part brand evolution method a second time with the creation of Rainbow High. Now anything that looks like poop or slime has been scrubbed off. The fantasy elements have been relegated to background elements and Easter eggs, and the focus is very much rainbows and brand tie-ins. Now they can provide a viable fashion doll line that skews older, can be targeted to the same audience as OMG, and doesn't have this infantile poop and slime gimmick tainting the line. It also took away the vast majority of the surprise elements. Now if you wanted a Rainbow High doll, you could very transparently pick out Sunny Madison or Violet Willow, just as you could pick out Yasmin or Chloe, or Claudine Wolf or Draculaura.
The evolution of Poopsie into Rainbow High is incredibly fascinating to me, and I had to have a little section in this video about it, because it's interesting that Rainbow High is almost like half a line.
It's been stripped of the more juvenile elements, and they haven't really replaced it with anything?
I'm going to hark back to the topic of personality and identity, but I really want to get into the message of brand messaging. Nice little segue. Often brands aimed towards children have this innate pressure to provide good messages to its young audience. More so in the doll market, where fashion dolls are often seen as shallow and frivolous.
That's not even mentioning how gender factors into all of this, the way standard form girliness is looked down upon, the way dolls are pressured to be good role models. It's a lot, and I'm nowhere near qualified enough to unpack that.
Aesthetics are obviously important, but a brand is gonna get more respect if it has something valuable to say.
For example, Bratz has a very distinct identity. Teenage girls with attitude expressing their passion for fashion, with a recurring motif of striking back against the blonde, white, and pink status quo. Monster High is a distinct aesthetic of darker, more gothic fashions, but also a strong message of embracing your freaky flaws, leading with kindness and being yourself. All set in a distinctly monster-fied high school. LOL Surprise is full of personality, even if its canon is rather shaky. It's babies and BBs ruling the world and slaying with an empowering attitude reminiscent of Bratz, whether they're lady divas, queen bees, or roller chicks. Rainbow High's identity is colourful high school, and rainbows, and the words rainbow and sparkle, and very close to reality designer outfits, and turn your colour up, whatever that means.
But why does this matter? Why does Rainbow High have to have a strong personality or identity or brand message? Why is this even a problem? Well, brand messaging can be an important factor in other aspects of a line. And this is where we get to... Let's talk about character development and the way that it links to brand messaging. It is a very symbiotic link. Strong brand messaging can help to further character development, and good character development can help in reinforcing a brand message. The prime examples of this are, no surprise, Monster High and its sister brand Ever After High. And for this section of the video, I'm going to be primarily focusing on the launch lineups for both of these brands and for Rainbow High.
Monster High began with a cast of 7 main characters that would form the first line of dolls. Frankie Stein, Draculaura, Claudine Wolf, Laguna Blue, Cleo Nile, Deuce Gorgon, and Ghoulia Yelps. Sure, Ghoulia didn't get her doll until later, but she was, in all respects, a fully established main character from the get-go, with a character profile and even her own star doll dress-up doll. And also, for the benefit of clarity, I'm not counting the various love interests and backgrounders that would eventually get dolls. Your time will come. New Ghoul at School immediately sets up the dynamic of these 7 characters. Frankie is the new girl, Draculaura and Claudine her 2 best friends, Cleo is the typical mean girl, Deuce is Cleo's boyfriend, Ghoulia is Cleo's best friend and assistant, and Laguna serves somewhat of a confidant role to Frankie, while rounding out the main group. Pretty clear dynamic. Over the first season of webisodes, they get the time and focus to really establish their key traits. Frankie is clumsy, a little naive and self-conscious, but predominantly the ultimate friendly girl. Draculaura is girly and excitable, Claudine is a fierce fashionista who stands by her friends, Cleo is a bit of a diva, Ghoulia is a socially inept genius, and Laguna is deeply empathetic to animals and ghoul friends alike. Arguably only Deuce ends up having less development, but male characters tend to get less development overall in doll lines, especially if they're positioned as love interests or already established romantic partners.
Overall, the characters have nuances, but they're all pretty simple in how they're laid out, so people can gather what their deal is pretty quickly.
And if you want more nuance, hey, the original Monster High dolls come with diaries which flesh out their characters further. Things like Cleo's insecurities, Deuce's love of cooking, and even Draculaura's family backstory can be conveyed through this extra narrative.
The development of these characters isn't just because good characters make a good series, it also ties into the greater message of Monster High as a brand.
All 7 of these characters have a freaky flaw, listed right there in the profile.
And while these flaws do get taken seriously, like Draculaura's insecurities and Ghoulia's need for scheduling, they're also accepted and embraced.
Cleo deliberately sets off Claudine's full moon transformation in episode 2, but it makes Claudine's performance even better. Frankie's limbs fly off during field-ending tryouts, but her struggle to reassemble herself make a killer routine. The message of freaky flaws being what makes you special is hammered into Monster High, and the character development helps to further this message. And in that symbiotic link, the brand messaging is part of what makes Frankie such a friendly and accepting character. It's what helps Cleo develop as a character over time. It's what brings these goals together.
I know it's not the only reason why the character development is what it is, but the synergy between the character development and the freaky flaws in all brand messaging is undeniable.
And this all helps the brand of Monster High become stronger and more distinctive. The tie between brand messaging and character development is even stronger with Ever After High, as its message is the whole crux of the storyline for most of the series. Royals vs Rebels and the Destiny conflict are the things that provoke most of the initial character development, especially with its lead characters. Raven Queen and Applewhite are defined and diametrically opposed by their positions in the Destiny conflict. Raven is destined to be evil but doesn't want to be, and wishes to write her own destiny, becoming the leaders of those who agree with or support her cause. Apple is destined to be the future queen, and wants it that way, and wishes to uphold the existing Destiny model, becoming the leader of those who also want to uphold tradition. The supporting characters are defined by their relation to the conflict and whether they lie with the Royals or Rebels, or just whether they lie with Apple or Raven. Maddie is happy to be the next Mad Hatter, but she sides with the Rebels because she agrees with her best friend Raven and anyone else choosing their own destinies. Briar is scared to sleep for 100 years, and Ashlyn wants to freely date who she wants, but out of loyalty to their best friend Apple and their collective social status, they side with the Royals. Blondie longs for the social standing and inclusion as royalties, so she also sides with the Royals. Cerise is hiding her secret parentage to avoid ostracization, while Cupid wants people to love who they want, so they both side with the Rebels. Whether this is in the web series, the books, or the doll diaries, the central storyline of Royals vs Rebels helps to give the characters an easy form of character development, while also positioning a message for the audience. You can choose your own destiny, whether that's following tradition or blazing your own trail. It helps that the existing link to Monster High through Cupid gave Ever After High an automatic audience, but Ever After High can easily stand on its own because of its strong storyline, character development, and brand messaging, just as Monster High does.
So with all that in mind, let's look at our main cast for Rainbow High. There are 6 main characters in Rainbow High, 7 if you count Amaya because she joins later on in the web series, and 8 if you count Bella's earlier appearances as her being a main character.
If we look at the first episode, let's see what it establishes about these characters. By far the best developed characters, at least in my opinion, are Violet and Sunny. They enter the series as best friends with an immediate storyline where Violet wants to branch out on her own and doesn't really go about it the best way. Over the series, we see her doing her influencer gig in the way it's influenced her personality. She has issues separating her real life from social media, isn't considerate towards other people's privacy, and especially early on, isn't the most likable character.
So you want to censor me?
But she's given enough focus and development which makes her an engaging character. Same with Sunny, who happens to be my favourite character. Her dynamic with Violet immediately establishes her character as an excitable and quirky friend who's not only a great comic relief character, but has genuine heart and makes you sympathise for her. So Violet and Sunny are a great duo of characters. Let's look at the others. Skylar is talented, but more timid and prefers to let her work speak for itself, while her insecurities are revealed when Colin cheats on her with Ruby. She's concerned that her talent isn't truly her own and that her relationship was the factor in her getting into Rainbow High, rather than her abilities as an individual. Okay, that's 3, great work. Jade is the snarky, edgy girl. We're told she's sporty, but she never really participates in sports. That really only comes through with her outfits, which I guess is fine. She's very defensive of her friends, especially her best friend and ambiguous love interest Bella, and is really hung up on her when she gets kicked out of school. And she dresses like Billie Eilish, okay. Then there's Ruby, who I guess she's impulsive? I think she's supposed to be fiery because of the whole fire motif in her outfits, But she's also really nice, and I guess that's it? And then there's Poppy, and she's a DJ who sometimes gets homesick. That's kind of it.
I don't really have a lot to say about Ruby or Poppy compared to Violet or Sunny, or even Skylar or Jade. And that's pretty concerning because these are supposed to be main characters.
The first episode shows that Sunny's roommates are nice, Violet's roommates are cool and stylish, and not a great deal else. They haven't really set up a dynamic like Monster High or Ever After High. There isn't any real internal conflict other than Violet being kind of a dick to Sunny, but even that's swept under the rug pretty quickly. Bella is nice enough, but I feel like she'd be fading even more into the background if it wasn't for her connection with Jade, since, let's face it, she doesn't get much else to do. She's just part of the gang.
And that same thing continues with Amaya. Oh, Amaya. Amaya's arrival in episode 7 could have been a really solid way to develop the characters, but instead it just makes the issue of poor character development even more glaring and obvious.
Amaya is very much positioned as the main character from this point onwards, and shifting focus off of an already underdeveloped cast onto a completely unrelated character isn't exactly a great idea.
And it doesn't help that Amaya's personality gives off what I call heavy, designated main character energy.
She is the Rainbow in Rainbow High, a super talented fashion designer and a weightless student who is nice and doesn't do anything wrong and doesn't do much else. She's the one who gets the most focus from now on, and she's the one who gets the love interest. But things don't really impact her in meaningful ways, and she doesn't really develop as a character. And in a series with episodes that only go over 7 minutes apiece, the possible character development of Ruby, Poppy, Jade, and Skylar is put on the back burner to give Amaya her due screen time as the main character. It doesn't help that the line is at a disadvantage since the dolls don't include diaries, but even then, it's not like you need diaries to provide at least sufficient character development.
So what can we fall back on here? Oh yeah, let me take down my brand messaging pin. Monster High and Ever After High both have strong brand messages that can help in developing the characters. But it can also act as a fallback of sorts, or like a crutch. Don't know how to develop a character? Link it to the brand message.
What's their freaky flaw, and how does it make them special? Or how does it impact their character? Are they nervous? Self-conscious? Stubborn? Mean? If there's a central conflict, how do they respond to it? Are they more of a royal or a rebel? Do they believe in sticking to tradition or letting people choose their futures?
These are easy springboards to help develop these characters, so let's see what we're working with Rainbow High.
Let's work backwards and start with the central conflict. The biggest central conflict in the first season of Rainbow High is probably Amaya's arrival. So let's see how the main characters respond to it and what we can imply from their reactions. Jade and Ruby are initially standoffish and a bit rude to her since she's replacing Bella, who they're both very attached to. Sunny, on the other hand, is friendly and supportive, lending a hand to an apprehensive Amaya. As for Skylar, she's a little concerned about another fashion designer entering the group, but this barely gets explored. Violet's fine, she doesn't really give a shit because Amaya's a fan of the Vi-Life, so that's a win for her. And Poppy is... what is Poppy doing? I don't know, they never tell us.
So in terms of development, it showed us that Jade is close to Bella, which we knew. Sunny is friendly and supportive and an absolute ray of sunshine, which we knew. Violet's got a bit of an ego about her regarding a web series, which, yeah, we knew. And Ruby is pretty peeved about Amaya replacing Bella, which... I guess it's one thing. That is the development we got from the big central conflict this season.
There also isn't very much drama here, and for a show that, quite literally, not at all paraphrasing, promised to deliver drama,
I hear the drama is as colorful as the fashion at Rainbow High.
the things just happen to the characters, who just do the thing and don't really exhibit much personality other than mainly Violet and Sunny.
So the central conflict didn't deliver much. What about the brand messaging? The brand message of Rainbow High is turn your color up.
The characters say this a few times in the series, it's kind of the arc motif, but what does it really mean? Let's look at the theme song, which is also called Turn Your Colour Up. The overall message of the song is be fashionable, show off your style, whatever your colour. That is something that none of these characters have much of an issue with. They're all depicted as fashionable, creative, at least relatively confident with no real struggle in expressing it. Other than Skylar's breakdown in episode 6 and the fact they're in one of the most cutthroat schools imaginable, and that obviously comes with a little stress.
Because none of them other than Skylar need to turn their colour up. how do they develop? Where's the impetus for growth and what's driving the characters?
So, is the message just keep doing what you're doing? Or is the message supposed to be about persistence? Is it supposed to be keep trying regardless of the challenges, or trust in your abilities? If so, the series does kind of a bad job at putting those messages to use. And as a result, the characters can't lean on the brand messaging for development. Is it because there are mean kids trying to bring them down? No, none of the characters in Season 1 get to truly play villainous roles, at least clearly. The A's look like they might be the mean kids in episode 1, but no, by episodes 3 and 4, they're nice, and Avery is primarily just the talented older mentor figure. Karma is implied to be mean, but she doesn't really do anything to earn this status. Or what about the school itself? Is it because the school is impossibly strict and the students need that stamina to survive? Maybe, but Rainbow High as an institution isn't portrayed as anything other than this amazing art school, and its cutthroat nature isn't ever questioned. Sure, Lou Wright and even Miss Morton have their strict moments, but it's never challenged or called into question. It's just how it is. And even then, the characters never really seem that stressed, so...
What am I doing here? If I try and analyse the crumbs of a story here anymore, I'm gonna burst a blood vessel. Let's talk about a different aspect of character development relating to doll lines. And to properly explain it, let's go back to Monster High. Again. Let's look at how Monster High expanded its cast in 2011.
Let's start with Claude Wolf. Claude was introduced as Claudine's brother and a love interest for her best friend Draculaura, which set off a whole storyline, deepening the development of all three characters and the Wolf family mythos. Same with Claudine's sister Howleen, who got introduced later that same year. Jackson Jekyll was introduced as Frankie's love interest in the web series. Holt Hyde was also introduced as Frankie's love interest in the web series. And once Jackson and Holt were revealed to be the same person, it set off a major storyline for Frankie trying to make sense of her feelings. Jackson's status as a normie also had a major link to the freaky flaws, be yourself inclusion messaging of the brand. Abby Abominable was the new ghoul at school who came across cold at first, but was misunderstood due to cultural differences, and later became one of the most valuable characters in the series. On one part, due to her ice powers being an easy tool to use for the writers to get out of sticky situations, and on the other part, because she's such great comic relief.
Conflict was also important to continue into 2011 because Cleo was entering her redemption arc that would help to evolve her character. So Mattel introduced new characters specifically to provide that conflict going forward.
Spectra Von der Geist was introduced as a gossip, which immediately brought in drama from her spreading stories. Toralei took over Cleo's spot as the resident mean girl along with her workout twin Entourage. Operetta was initially positioned as a foe to Cleo and a rival for Deuce's affections, before settling into more of a helper role to the ghouls, especially if it involved navigating the catacombs. And finally, Nephra Denial entered the series as part of Cleo's redemption arc, expanding the Denial family and providing explanation for some of Cleo's insecurities and why she was the way she was in that first season. All of these new characters got dolls, and I mean in multiple lines, and most, if not all, became fan favourites and series mainstays.
One of the biggest takeaways of this, and of Monster High in general, is that if you introduce a bunch of new characters, people are going to want to get their dolls.
This worked in 2011 and continued all the way until the line stopped producing dolls in 2017.
The basic message is, new characters sell. Not every collector is going to want to get every version of Frankie Stein or Cleo Denial or Operetta, but there are many collectors who will collect one of each character. I know this because I was one of those collectors. I only ever got one version of each character by and large, and as a result of that, my focus was on getting these new characters.
And naturally, Monster High would introduce more and more new characters each year, and obviously over the years the level of development for these characters got sloppier and sloppier, and you'd have a new movie every 6 months with 4 new characters that would pop up once and never appear again.
But in the beginning, I think they did pretty well.
So, with this message in place, Mattel launched Ever After High on May 30th, 2013, with a grand total of 11 characters getting named appearances in the first 3 webisodes that premiered on launch day. Apple, Raven, Briar, Maddie, Ashlyn, Blondie, Cerise, Cedar, Hunter, Daring, and Dexter. A week later, we got named appearances of 2 more characters, Kitty and Lizzie, and a few weeks later we got the first proper appearance of crossover character Cupid, who had already appeared in the title sequence. That is 14 doll-ready characters, and that's not even counting the fact that Duchess Swan made a background appearance in the Legacy Day flashbacks, which I honestly forgot about.
Now, I wasn't in the boardroom when Ever After High was being developed, but I can say with 100% confidence that none of this was by chance. This was 100% intentional to help drum up buzz for the line. I remember that launch day in 2013. I was there, and on that day, 2 tiny pictures of the Apple and Raven dolls in box had leaked. And there was a big fan demand for every other character to get a doll.
There were the Maddie stands, the Briar stands, the Cerise stands, there were Kitty and Lizzie stands before they'd even made speaking appearances wanting their dolls.
Mattel saw how much people wanted that Ghoulia doll in 2010 and said, let's do that, but for like 12 characters.
And it worked exactly as planned. Even characters that never got dolls like Lily Bo Peep, Hopper, Humphrey, and nearly every single background character, people wanted dolls of them.
And if you need any more concrete proof of this method in action, it's literally in the launch presentation for Ever After High.
We learned from Monster High that girls didn't just want to own 1 or 2 characters, they wanted them all. So far, we've created dolls for nearly 40 Monster High characters, and Ever After High will be no different.
This is the big thing that Mattel learned from Monster High. It is financially beneficial to make new characters, and it's beneficial in terms of fan engagement to set up these new characters in the fiction early on. So you have people making fan content and getting hyped to see if their fave is being released next.
Just like people clamoured for Ghoulia, people would clamour for Cerise and Kitty and Lizzie and Cedar. And when those dolls did get released, good news for Mattel, because not only do new characters sell, but fans are already attached to the characters, so they'll definitely get them.
With all that in mind, how does this relate to Rainbow High? Let's be real, you know exactly how this relates to Rainbow High.
Rainbow High introduced the 6 main characters and Bella in that first episode. They also introduced playset doll Avery Styles and her 2 besties Aiden and Ainsley, plus Principal Lou Wright. Over the course of the first season, we'd see the first appearances of Stella, Amaya, River, Karma, Crystal, Miss Martin, Kaya, Jet, and the Devious Twins.
And just as we saw with Monster High and Ever After High before it, there was hype, and there was clamoring.
Where was the Bella doll? When can we get the Bella doll? When are they going to make Aiden and Ainsley? Can we have this one background character as a doll? When's Stella coming out? Does this leaked AliExpress head mean we're getting a Miss Martin doll?
It's the same method that made Ghoulia a cult fave and put so much steam into Ever After High's engine. And of course, because new characters sell, MGA is gonna make dolls of new characters to put into the group. It's a tried and true method, and it's kind of wearing thin.
I've seen a common complaint from fans that Rainbow High is introducing too many new characters at once.
It is a complaint that I wholeheartedly agree with.
As much as the newer Rainbow High dolls have been exceeding the quality and diversity of the first set, it's become a lot harder to keep up with everyone and, more importantly, connect to the characters.
And you might be thinking, with all of this talk I've been doing about character development, why does it matter? A doll's a doll. If a doll is good, people will buy it. Why does it matter if the doll's based on a well-developed character? It's because developing the character is mutually beneficial to both the owner and to the toy company. Yeah, it can make the character, and to an extent, a series better from a writing perspective, but developing a character helps viewers connect with them more, making them more likely to get their doll. And I know this because this happened to me with Series 2.
Stella Monroe was introduced in episode 5 of the web series with this absolute home run of an establishing scene.
Prefect party? I gotta get ready now! Move!
As a doll, I don't think Stella's outfits are particularly interesting, and her doll wasn't the highest priority for me compared to Crystal, Bella, or River, who I felt delivered more as dolls. But as a character, I was able to connect with Stella through her personality in the series. Sure, she's that highly unrealistic brand of posh, tea-drinking British Marquess, but she gets little moments to shine, and Deneen Melody's voice acting helps bring so much life and personality to the character. Stella's characterization made me want her doll more, and as a result, I bought her doll earlier.
So yes, it is in MGA's best interest to develop these characters. A lot of toy companies tend to create characters based on archetypes, and Rainbow High is no different.
That's how we get a character like Stella. She's a stereotype, and by no means an accurate one, but she's distinctive.
There isn't another character like Stella in Rainbow High, which is ideally what you want, especially in a world with so many characters. Now let's look at the other characters in Series 2, other than Amaya and Bella, who we've previously discussed.
I mentioned Karma earlier, but I want to dig a little further into why I feel like her character has so much missed potential. She's implied to be a bit shady through her content with Karma web series, her online bio, and makeup sheet. But the web series never takes any time to explore this facet of her personality. She's clearly not totally squeaky clean judging by content with Karma's sensationalist tone, and she doesn't seem too fussed on Violet from her bio and makeup sheet. But she seems happy to help Bella reclaim her narrative with no hint of her having a secret agenda, and she never even interacts with Violet in the main series other than laughing at her Bubble Boogie video, which everyone did.
I'm not saying that Karma has to be totally good or totally an asshole, but it feels like the series is holding back in establishing where she lies in all of this.
Give her that scene of her interacting with Violet. Give her that wink to the camera. Give her something. We don't get any real conflict from this character who really could bring the drama that the series has been promising this whole time. Is she confident in her mess? Does she feel regret about spreading gossip? Is she good-natured but feels a need for clicks? Is that what drives her, or is it her social standing? Is her personality just saying sus a lot? I hope it isn't.
These are questions that very easily could be answered, but don't get answered because she's a new character and we need to introduce her so people will buy her doll. And we've got 3 more characters to go, so move along.
As for the others, Kaya is established as a matchmaker, that is, after the season's big romance storyline is already wrapped up. Sorry Kaya, these boring heterosexuals did it all by themselves. She at least gets to work at the Rainbow Union, which gives us some time to shine. Speaking of boring heterosexuals, River gets bogged down with the nice jock archetype, which is honestly unsurprising judging by the fact that male characters in doll lines never get much development beyond being a love interest. And Crystal is a nice journalist. That's it. She's the best doll in Series 2, and yet she gets very little real characterization other than nice journalist. I had this fan theory around the time the first webisodes were coming out that Crystal's journalism might have had something to do with Bella getting expelled, and while the prospect of them putting their only dark-skinned character at the time in a villainous role was pretty bleak, at least it would have given her something.
Giving a character a job or a career as their primary trait can help develop them, but it shouldn't be the only distinct thing about them. Like, that's not good development.
By the end of the first season, we get appearances from Jet Dawson and the Devious Twins. Now, while I don't love the Devious Twins as characters, to me they feel like flat mean girl baddies who she twinks on the internet live vicariously through. But as far as their place in the narrative, they are bringing actual conflict, actual drama that feels like what a series set in high school should be bringing. So I've got to commend that. Jet Dawson, on the other hand, plays the role of talented older mentor figure, which, didn't I say that was Avery's role? Yeah, Jet is basically just Avery, but more accomplished and qualified, without any of Avery's potential moral ambiguities.
It's someone for the students to impress, but they already have to impress the strictest school on the planet, so that makes that kind of redundant.
So far, it feels like there's a lot of missed opportunities with these newbies. They can't bring themselves to properly establish Karma as a dramatic figure. They can't be bothered to include the matchmaker character in their one romantic storyline. They can't give Crystal anything. And I can't even blame them that much because they have to spend time developing Amaya, integrating the other characters into Amaya's storyline, integrating the Chia line into an episode, finding ways to develop Ruby and Poppy, which could have mostly gone off without a hitch if they had that foundation of well-developed characters in the first place.
But hey, the one thing about issues is that there's always a way to fix them. And there's a second series of webisodes to fix them in. Now they can lean in, play their cards right, just take things easy.
Meet Rainbow High's new students.
Great.
Bad! Oh, very bad! Very, very bad!
The second season of webisodes has the job of establishing the Series 3 dolls as characters, as well as the dolls from the then upcoming Sleepover and Rockstar lines.
That is a grand total of 12 new characters added to a web series that is already struggling to juggle undeveloped characters as it is.
Let's start with the first doll I got from Series 3. Georgia Bloom is a similar kind of character to Stella in that they're both clearly based on existing archetypes, Georgia being a Southern belle. She's an aspiring actress who gets her main scenes in, would you look at that, an acting storyline. She doesn't get much screen time, but the series does a decent job with the time she gets to give her personality. Robin Sterling is a similar case, as she leans in heavily to the old Hollywood aesthetic in her style and mannerisms.
It's a basic foundation, but it helps make her distinctive to the kids watching, because let's face it, this is a show for children. I know this show isn't Breaking Bad, but god damn it, children deserve better than nothing. And characters in children's television, even in webisodes, deserve to have some substance.
Thankfully, Robin does have that old Hollywood vibe, which gives her that distinction.
Shall we look at the other characters?
Cheryl Meyer is the first character to be based on one of the background characters, and because people thought she looked like Cher off Clueless, the style of her updated appearance and doll follow that inspiration. And that's all she really gets as far as personality. Brianna Dulce also falls a little into this trap, Her outfits are sweet, so her personality is sweet. She fares a little better than most of the other newbies, but still. We also have such characters as nice jeweler Daphne Minton, nice songwriter Daria Rosalyn, nice artist Emmy Vanda, nice photographer, I had to look that up, nice photographer Marissa Golding, and nice band members 1, 2, and 3, the names barely even matter at this point.
MGA is very lucky that the designs of these dolls are as good as they are, because other than that, there is no way to get attached to these characters. And it sucks.
It sucks because these characters could be standouts in the series. They could easily shake the table and make interesting storylines, but instead it just feels like the new characters were included because of contractual obligation, because they need to sell Series 3 dolls and Rockstar dolls and the 5 sleepover dolls that got stocked at Walmart.
It also sucks because the voice cast that plays them doesn't get to make the most out of their roles which, judging by their online profiles, could have had more to them.
Emmy is implied to be dark, sarcastic, and moody, but this never gets shown in the series. Her dynamic with Gabriella is commented on, but that never pops up other than a throwaway line from Cheryl.
Well, except now Gabriella is upset with Emmy about missing her cue.
This should not have been a throwaway line. This should have been shown on screen. Apparently Daphne is the one to go to when drama's brewing because she doesn't hold back. That never gets shown. She's just another generic nice girl in the web series. By the end of the series, the vast majority of these characters are basically just backgrounders. And while it's fun to see them as part of the student body, especially during Radiant Week when they get mixed in with the OGs, it always feels like the new characters are a complete afterthought.
You wanna know why else this sucks? Because in season 2, there is an example of a new character who is well-rounded, creates conflict, and also made me want her doll more. Every ounce of thought that could have built up these characters found its way into Gabriella Isley.
Gabriella might be the most well-characterized Rainbow High character since Violet and Sunny. At first, she seems like a typical mean girl. She antagonizes Amaya, is rude to her, and mocks how she's a waitlist kid. But we also see how much she wants approval from the people around her. She idolizes Jet and is fuming when Amaya is the one who impresses her instead. She wants to be seen as valuable to the Devious twins during their play, and just gets brushed off.
Don't worry, I'm important. No, you're not.
Her competitive nature is expressed in both her antagonistic nature and these moments with characters like Jet and the Devious twins. This gives Gabriella a key role in creating conflict, but it doesn't come off as flat either.
This shows that developing characters and giving them roles where they can flourish isn't this impossible feat for Rainbow High, because they've done it with Gabriella. She gets more development in one episode than I think Poppy gets in a whole season. It's kind of baffling. So why is this the exception and not the rule? Well, how can you expect them to do that for 12 characters at once?
It's not like they're part of the Launch Foundation like the original Ever After High cast was. They had around the same number and had much better development, but that's because they were designed into the world from day one. These characters are being added to an existing world with existing characters to interact with. There's already an established status quo, and even then, there's still storylines going on with the original characters. Violet and Sunny are resolving their issues, Amaya's continuing to establish herself, the A's are still here and they've got a storyline. There's only so much they can do with all of these characters in a bunch of 8-minute webisodes, so most of them are just gonna have to be flat characters. MGA is gonna keep making new characters because new characters sell, and the writers and animation studio are gonna have to include these characters to push sales of the new dolls further. I'm sure MGA would have that pretty clear in the contracts for these shows.
I've been talking a lot about character development in Rainbow High and how it isn't great, but I don't think I've painted the best picture of how this isn't completely the writer's fault. I think the initial lack of development, yeah, they should have started with a better foundation. But now, with 12 new characters getting thrown into the mix, any short-form web series would struggle with this.
Monster High and Ever After High would both struggle with this, and if you look at how the later newbies from both of these lines were incorporated into the web series, you can see they aren't given much to do either than just exist because the doll is coming out.
We've gone past the point of the writers haven't done this properly, and we've gone all the way to there isn't any logistical way for the writers to do this properly. So, where do we go from here? I'm gonna be real with you. I don't know if there is a solution to this problem, or at least a solution that's gonna go well with MGA's release schedule.
Like I said a minute ago, MGA is gonna keep making new characters because new characters sell, and judging by the release of the Pacific Coast dolls, the introduction of Shadow High, and Series 4 dolls all on the horizon, I think this problem is only gonna get worse. I do have glimmers of hope though. Pacific Coast having its own contained series could give the characters more focus and better development, and the Shadow High characters already seem to be much better characterized normalized, with Chanel's unapologetic diva persona, Natasha's sweet and endearing role as the school butt monkey, and Ash being a male character with an actual personality. I do feel like the junior high series of dolls could have led to some sort of flashback episodes where each of the main characters get that extra depth and backstory, but I don't think that's what they're doing.
Those are just my personal theories though. I don't know what MGA's got up their sleeve. I do have one card that I'd like to play as a potential solution. Not a complete solution, mind you, but something that can give Rainbow High that little boost that it needs. And it's the only other phrase in this video that I've said as much as character development. Brand messaging. And one thing about brand messaging is that it can evolve over time.
That's evident with some of the biggest doll lines out there. Barbie might have represented unapologetic glamour and excess in the past, but their push to seem more relatable and better represent diversity is gonna give a current Barbie doll a different significance to one from the 60s. Not necessarily a lesser or greater significance, just a different one, a different message. Do you remember that Monster High technically didn't introduce its most famous slogan until 2011, the year after it launched? Because while Freaky Just Got Fabulous speaks to Monster High as a chic high school for monsters, it's hard to deny that Be Yourself, Be Unique, Be a Monster really solidified Monster High's formidable message of embracing your freaky flaws. It might just be marketing, but the push to associate a product with a message or a feeling or a tangible thing, that helps people to connect with it better, and it also helps the product to gain the distinction to become a market leader, a household name, something people can be passionate about. And all of that doesn't have to happen from launch. Barbie and Monster High both prove that it can be a later development to either redefine a brand's message or strengthen it.
For Rainbow High, an evolution in brand messaging could help give these characters a new context as a springboard for development. I know that sounds like a bunch of word salad, so let me put it another way.
If the message of Rainbow High is turn your colour up, or as of more recently, let your true colours shine, connecting a character's storyline to that message can help develop them. For example, Skylar turning her colour up by being more outspoken about her work.
But because, like I said earlier, the majority of the characters here have no problem with turning their colour up, maybe it's time to switch up that brand message to something that could provoke that development. Oh yeah, I brought up some ideas about that earlier, didn't I?
So is the message just keep doing what you're doing? Or is the message supposed to be about persistence? Is it supposed to be keep trying regardless of the challenges, or trust in your abilities?
Persistence and self-confidence are both messages that could work.
If I had to pick one, well, self-confidence doesn't really affect a lot of the characters other than Skylar, again, and I guess Amaya, so since persistence is more relevant to a greater number of characters, and it's a tough school and it's competitive, let's go with persistence as a message. I still think there could be better conflict with this idea in place, especially if they actually admitted that Rainbow High as a school is pretty unreasonable at times, instead of portraying it as beyond question.
However, I like the idea of the main message being about persistence and not giving up.
It applies to how Amaya didn't give up on getting into Rainbow High, how Bella didn't give up on her dream regardless of the consequences, how Violet didn't give up after her Bubble Boogie embarrassment, how Sunny didn't give up on her friendship with Vi even through their trouble, how none of them end up quitting even as the stress mounts up. It feels like that has a greater resonance than turn your colour up.
And even better, it can be applied to the other characters in that easy springboardy way to provide some quick development.
We can ask, how does Ruby need to persist? What hill does Poppy have to climb? What does Daphne find challenging? What hurdles does Crystal face? Just by linking it to the brand message, Rainbow High is a challenging environment, but our fierce students find ways to face up to the challenge, keep moving forward and never give up on their dreams.
Never surrender!
Now, we are gonna have to package that message of persistence into a catchy slogan with some kind of rainbow-themed pun, and I can't think of one right now, so leave your suggestions in the comments below. The problem with Rainbow High, in short, is actually more like two problems. The first problem relates to the link between the brand's thin messaging and the poor development of its lead characters. Because Rainbow High is a weak brand message, it can't be used as a quick and easy springboard for character development. And because the characters seem flat, it makes its message in turn seem less meaningful. The second problem is that MGA's approach of releasing lots of new characters in the toy line has made developing these characters in the series almost impossible, as the web series has to cycle through new characters without developing them sufficiently. This stacks on top of the first problem and basically results in a world of flat and undeveloped characters, ones that don't contribute any valuable message to the show's young audience. And while it may seem impossible to fix this problem, and MGA is going to keep releasing new characters because they sell more than repeat versions of existing characters, there is one possible quick fix to help alleviate things. Providing a stronger brand message for Rainbow High can help give the characters a reason for development, whether it's part of a character's personal journey or as part of a conflict between characters. And my personal proposal would be a message of persistence and not giving up in the face of adversity.
Whether that's a pair of Orsol twins, personal insecurities, or the fact that this school is basically a prison.
And that's it. That's where we are with Rainbow High. I'm very interested to see how this series is going to evolve and how, if they're gonna alleviate these issues. If you've got any thoughts on this issue, I'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments. And if you disagree with me, that's okay. If you think that this isn't as big of a problem as I'm making it out to be, that's fine. I'd love to hear what you all think about this, and I'm all up for some discussion. Just keep it respectful. And if you like dolls, cute mix and match fashions, and dressing up the former in the latter, boy do I have something for you. This video is brought to you by my very own Bratz Project Closet.
Bratz Project Closet is an ongoing fan project aiming to bring together 20 years worth of Bratz fashions all in one place. It's a dress-up game where you can mix and match outfit pieces from lines such as Pretty and Punk, Rock Angels, Talking Bratz, and more. The game is always evolving with free updates bringing in new pieces from classic Bratz lines from across the brand's history. Best of all, it's free to download with no microtransactions, none of that crypto nonsense, and no hassle. Just head to the Google Drive link below, download the PowerPoint file, and get to mixing and matching.
I worked really hard to make this a fun and exciting project, and I hope more people get to enjoy it. That's all from me today. Thank you for watching this video. This is the first time I filmed this kind of hybrid video essay thing, so if I look like I don't know what I'm doing, it's because I don't know what I'm doing. But I hope this video turned out decently. I'm sure editing me will give me a nice little caption to tell me how I did. Thank you. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more from me, I'm hoping to make more occasional doll content on this new side channel. So if you want to see more from me, subscribe to the channel below. And if you liked it, give it a like. Thanks again for watching, and from me and the Pog, have a blessed day.